Hey everybody, this is Casey Monk. I'm with Revinate, and we're so excited that you're here with us today for today's webinar. So today we're going to be talking about navigating the recovery with fewer resources. I think this is a challenge that we're all very familiar with here in hospitality, in the hotel industry. We've got a great lineup for you today of some of the most amazing tech vendors, as well as two hoteliers from the field who are going to talk to you about their experience, what it was like to navigate the recovery, and some of the solutions that they found using technology and an integrated tech stack to deal with less staff and trying to do more with all this amazing demand that's starting to come back. So let's go over our agenda today. So, oops, went a little bit further there. Okay, there we are. So first, as I said, we're going to hear from two hoteliers and hear about their challenges first. Next, we're going to talk about how an RMS can help you adapt to recovery demand trends that ebb and flow. Next, we'll talk about how PMS can alleviate pressure and laborious tasks on your lean teams. And after that, we'll move into the marketing department and discuss how CRM and marketing automation tools can digitize the guest journey, make it touchless, and streamline some of those repeatable processes that don't really require so much human intervention in the day-to-day. And lastly, we'll talk with our two hoteliers again, with Bridgeton Hospitality and Pacifica Hotels, and hear how they overcame their staffing shortages using their vertically integrated tech stack. And then we'll cap it off with a Q&A from you guys in the audience. We really want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear what's working and what's not. So drop your questions into the question area. If you do have any technical issues, feel free to drop them in the chat. We do have Free with Stayntouch, who's on the back end there monitoring everything, and she can help you with anything that may be going on. So let's go ahead and turn it over to Lucas Profit with Bridgeton Hospitality and Brandon Burtis with Pacific Hotels. So first, let's talk about the challenges. So Lucas, I know many of your properties are seasonal in nature, and you guys had a lot of challenges trying to find even just seasonal staff to man and woman the properties. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Lucas Profit. I work for Bridgeton Hospitality, based in New York. We're experiential hoteliers. But yeah, so we have a few of our more seasonal properties. We really struggled with staffing, as I know a lot of hotels did, including a seasonal workforce. So having the staffing, and then additionally, our seasonal properties actually saw an increase as COVID went with some of the restrictions. We kind of had a perfect storm of light staffing and heavy demand. So the technology that we'd recently started implementing allowed us to work faster and better with fewer people. And we could also pretty quickly implement touchless things that guests wanted and those kind of things like that. So we were able to navigate those challenges pretty well with the technology as we fixed that tech stack.
That's great, Lucas. And I'd like to know, as I understand it, like during the pandemic and leading up to that, you guys didn't really have an integrated tech stack. There were a lot of silos. So can you talk about just some of the challenges that you had with that? And then at the end of the webinar, we'll talk about like kind of what made you get to some decisions that you had to make. But what were some of the pain points that you guys had with this like kind of silo situation with all your systems?
Yeah, so prior to the pandemic, we had quite a few systems, but none of them talked with each other. So we spent a lot of time, pulling reports out of here and then inputting over here, or manually doing a lot of processes along the way. So one of the things that we decided to tackle during the pandemic was to try to integrate that tech stack. And we're still in the process where we haven't completely finished everything. We actually just sent our first email through Revinate yesterday. So we've been building that and integrating that, but it did cause a lot of issues, and we kind of realized that we were spending a lot of time doing manual processes that we could be automating, and it allowed us to work smarter by integrating things.
That's great. After you've had so many years of dealing with the manual work, it can be like a whole new world once you get things integrated
Yeah.
together. So yeah, thanks, Lucas. And Brandon,
Mhm.
what about you? What were some of the biggest challenges that you guys had at Pacifica Hotels during this time?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Brandon Burtis, Pacifica Hotels, Corporate Director of Revenue. So we are a portfolio, mostly independent hotels between San Francisco and San Diego, and a few assets out in Hawaii as well. So definitely West Coast, but looking to make our way east, so watch out. But I'd say our biggest challenge early on was obviously identifying kind of, how and where to cut. What hotels did it make sense to suspend operations, particularly in a lot of our markets where we have multiple hotels in the same market. There wasn't demand to have necessarily 4 hotels within a couple miles of each other to all be open and trying to operate and fight for 10% occupancy in the market, if that. And then identifying who staffing wise needs to be furloughed and where can we, what's the minimum staffing we need to maintain operations. And then within that, once we had that skeleton crew identified, it was just the challenge of constant communication. Everybody knows things were changing just by the second, in terms of what the restrictions were, what the laws were locally, nationally, whatever the case was, what your staffing situation was, what demand was in the market, what cleaning requirements were in place. So there's just a lot that needed to constantly be communicated across marketing and operations and sales and revenue, just to make sure that the hotel was not only open and trying to capture that demand, but was successful in doing so and was doing the right things at the right time. So definitely helped to have a unified tech stack in place. We got on to Stayntouch throughout the pandemic and finally got the entire portfolio of our independent hotels on Stayntouch. So now have a more unified tech stack. We had at least somewhat of a integrated tech stack previously, but now we have enhanced integrations with Stayntouch, being a more of a two-way partner with more of our other channels and partners. So a lot more seamless communication and partnership there, a lot of synergy.
That's great. Yeah, sometimes when it comes down to the lean crew, you can start to see where things can connect. That sometimes with, everyone being there, you just kind of get caught up in the day to day. So that's great to hear, Brandon. Thank you. So we're going to speak to both Lucas and Brandon at the close of the webinar with more on the solutions and how they overcame some of these things and what it's like now for them. So don't leave. Be sure to stay tuned for the rest of this to hear their stories. So now we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Gary Glodowski with Duetto. Take it away, Gary.
Thanks, Casey. So yes, I'm Gary Glodowski. I've been with Duetto for a couple of years. Prior to that, I was a hotelier myself for many years and actually was blessed to be a customer of all 3 vendors actually on the phone today. So kind of a unique experience being on both sides of the fence, but excited to take you through some of our what we call controlled automation features within the system. And there are a lot of efficiencies you can gain from an RMS. So this is by no means the only options, but we're focusing in on some of the newer features that in terms of response to the pandemic and finding ways to help our clients and partners to navigate this with, as we've all alluded to, with less resources. So autopilot schedules and restriction rules, and then autopilot for restrictions and min-max bounds are the features we're going to focus in on. Sliding on to the next slide, please. So autopilot schedules, this is kind of a fun addition to the platform in terms of we've had autopilot for many years. It was more or less an on-off switch, and this allowed us to make these schedules more conditional. So some examples we have are only applying auto-publishing for your rates in a scenario where you're above 90%. Is a pretty simple example. And then there are options with multi-conditions in the sense of outside of 30 days, when I'm above 50%, I always want to jump on that opportunity and auto-publish those rates. And then some sort of more kind of put your mind at ease in terms of off hours, weekends, holidays. When you're going on vacation, you can actually turn it on. So Brandon, I know some of your properties have some rules put in place. Maybe you can kind of just give us a little example of how you've been able to utilize it and perhaps the benefits you've realized.
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely taken advantage of this. As I mentioned, staffing was a big challenge, and prior to the pandemic, even the way that we were structured at Pacifica was, kind of regional revenue team. So already our revenue leaders were used to supporting a portfolio of a handful of hotels, but with staffing shortages, that just that escalated pretty quickly. So when one person is having to manage 12 to 15 hotels, definitely anything we can do to streamline automation, and the process was definitely a huge success. And this was a big part of that, being able to, as you mentioned, lots of different filters allow you to really control your strategy with still giving automation without concerns that the system might do something a little too crazy. And I know we'll touch on that question here in a few minutes, but this kind of helps balance that with leaning into technology and automation while also allowing yourself a little bit of that comfortability by putting up some bumpers and using the filters to really target how you want the system to be in control versus when you might want to be in control.
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the beauty of it. We certainly have clients that utilize this and turn it on full board. It doesn't have to be a complicated set of rules in the sense of, you can just simply turn on for your sub rates, for example, if you want to take advantage of some of the pricing that you might have for some of your discounted rates without even pushing your bar rates, in the sense if you still have control of that. But it's a way for a lot of clients to, like Brandon mentioned, kind of ease into the automation aspect of publishing rates. If we can slide on over to the next one. And just like rates, restrictions are something we really tried to streamline. And these are really simple in the sense that you have a strategy in place on property. The easy example is you get to a certain level of occupancy on a Saturday night, you don't want to peak out, or on a Tuesday night in a corporate market. It's a really easy way for you to automate these restrictions in a way that you have peace of mind that not only is the restriction going to be put in place if you meet that condition, but then it would also be lifted in a scenario where perhaps you fell below that 90% occupancy, had some cancellations come through. So it's a way to empower even your property level teams in the sense of taking more control of the restrictions on property. But again, this is something that can get very, very complex. You can build rules that are based on shoulder dates and this and that, or you can keep it pretty simple. And in like the example I gave in terms of just protecting certain peak nights during the week, we can roll on over. And as part of that, we have the option to actually still allow you to either go in and manually accept those restrictions, or you have that ability to auto-publish those restrictions. So it's sort of an on-off button for that piece. And again, it's just kind of a way to minimize the time that you might have to spend in the system, especially in a scenario like Brandon and Lucas, where they're managing multiple properties. Lucas, I mean, perhaps you can shed a little light on. I know you're newer to the system, but I know that restriction rules was something that piqued your interest during your onboarding process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we actually only went live with Duetto at 2 of our properties about a month ago. So we're still in the process of kind of figuring out the strategies, but we're really quite excited about the ability to yield better and having a lot of things work more automatic because as revenue teams, we spend a lot of time in that kind of day-to-day operations. The making changes here and closing 15 rates as you go through, things like that. We can do it much quicker by using these kind of rules. So we're very excited about this possibility and getting this all set up. So yeah, I can't speak super well on it because we're only about a month in, but very excited about it.
I've seen you playing around in the settings, so I know it's coming.
I've only broke it once.
Yeah, no, again, it's geared towards a scenario where you might be handling multiple properties. We all can't watch every hotel every day, every hour of the day. So it's really intended for even those off-peak times where you might hopefully be enjoying some R&R. We can slide on to the next slide. And as part of the autopilot scenario with rates, just to touch on this briefly, we did actually enhance this area in terms of min-max bounds and finding ways to just simply make it easier from a UI perspective, but then also make it as dynamic as possible when it comes to seasonal. So the fear, if you will, of handing the controls over to the system can be alleviated by spending some time putting in these min-maxes by segment so that you're feeling comfortable with the variances that you might see in terms of recommendations from the systems. There's a lot of ways for us to curb those recommendations in terms of the actual percentage that it might ever offer up, for example. And then Duetto's algorithm in the end is designed to learn from your overrides. So if you go in and override today, simply put, not that we would encourage you to do so, but in the sense that if you do, you find a way, the system will recognize that and actually work off of your inputs. So you have sort of the bumpers with the min-max bounds, and then the system learning from you as you're in the markets. And ways for us to gauge the success of this, we would look at rate acceptance. So Brandon, I was peeking at some of your properties in terms of rate acceptance. It seems the rules that are in place for the hotels, you have certainly a higher level of acceptance. We're always monitoring this. This is something that is really near and dear to my heart, is ways to make people feel more comfortable with embracing this. So we want transparency as far as where there are opportunities, what tweaks we can make in the back end by season to make you feel as comfortable as possible. And that, I think, wraps up my slides. Back to you, Casey.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, thanks. We're gonna, I did have a question for you. So why are some hotels, like, it sounds like a lot of hotels, so cautious about pricing automation, and how do they overcome this fear, Gary?
Yeah, I mean, being a former dorm myself, it's almost a sense of pride to price your hotels and to have sort of a pulse and the control on all of it every day. But at the end of the day, it's really about finding ways to build efficiencies within your day. So that is, again, kind of going back to the conditional elements. As we've rolled this out and encouraged clients to utilize it, we've encouraged them to try it for within 7 days and see how the system does, as an example. And again, going back to some of that rate acceptance reporting, that's ultimately how we can kind of sort of point to it and say, and I think this was actually a case I might have made to Brandon where we were pointing at some of the hotels and saying, hey, you're already accepting a certain level of rates. Why don't we go ahead and automate that and then continue to monitor it? So I think it's just about finding ways to make yourself feel comfortable. And then we've had some conversations recently, done a couple of interviews with sort of an executive buyer, if you will, of our system, and then some of the end users, and asking them sort of how they sold this, not just to themselves, but also to their property teams. And the feedback really always kind of came down to just transparency and then showing them the results.
That's great. Thanks so much, Gary. So now we're going to turn it over to Michael Heflin with Stayntouch. Take it away, Michael.
Thank you so much, Casey. And Gary, I think that was a great lead-in, actually, to what we're going to talk about here. We're in the midst of a relatively large research project with students at the NYU Hospitality School, and I got asked the question yesterday about, do we think that, sort of the mobile and automated PMS technology will end up replacing any sort of certain departments in the hospitality world in the future? And I thought it was an interesting question. I think the answer to it is, at least today, certainly no. I don't see it coming anytime in the near future. I think what we're trying to do is improve the capabilities and perhaps broaden the perspective of hoteliers across departments. Right? I think great technology sort of enhances and empowers people. It doesn't replace people. I'm sure there's engineering technology that might disagree with that, but especially in the hospitality space, where at the end of the day, our goal is to provide hospitality. Like, that's a person-to-person exchange. We just want to allow those people to do more. And I think that really is what the goal of a great PMS should be, is really focusing on this facilitation of hospitality. If anything, our goal is to sort of get out of the way as much as possible, right? And that's getting out of the way of the guest and getting out of the way of the staff, so that they can come for what they came for, which is to experience the destination, to experience the property, to experience the amenities. It very rarely is to experience the property management system, right? And I hope that there are very few hoteliers that got into this business because they really enjoy clicking buttons. I think a lot of it is that they want to create great hospitality experience, right? And so we really want to be committed to empowering that end goal. And nothing makes us happier than hearing the stories of customers and partners of ours who are doing that, right? Or sort of bringing that to life on the ground. The hard part about being a technology provider is you're sort of always one step removed from actually seeing the smiling faces. The great news is that hopefully we can live vicariously through you all if we do this well. So, and hopefully we're doing that. Casey, can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I sort of mentioned that, the way that we look to do this at Stayntouch is really twofold, and it starts with the guest, right? What made Stayntouch unique in the marketplace from the day it came about was we're sort of the only PMS that was built guest backwards. Most PMSs, and certainly all legacy PMSs, were sort of built from the management office out. we really started with the guest interaction and then built back to how we improve that connectivity between guest and staff. And a lot of that is about giving the guest the control over their own journey through mobile PMS access, through mobile check-in, through kiosk-driven check-in, or even if you want to sit down with someone when you get to the hotel, the simplicity of not having to queue in a line and not having to wait for a check-in process, but being able to experience the hotel and really drive that process yourself, I think has become more important, not just to how you can work with a lean staff. Obviously, needing less check-in agents and more people focused on facilitating hospitality is certainly beneficial. But also, I think if we've learned anything over the last 18 months, it's that we need to be really responsive, right? And we don't even necessarily know what we need to be responsive to. Certainly, if you had asked someone 18 months ago what they wanted to be responsive to, it'd be a very different answer than you're going to get today. The key is having technology that can be responsive, so that when a guest has a demand or staff member has a unique way of doing things, we've got software that can enable that, right? Whether it's through workflow functionality or whether it is through automating some of the tasks that are better left to be automated, it allows them sort of the power to focus on the areas that really need to be focused in. And we're very proud of, the reduction in staff check-in time. You'll note we don't talk about reduced staff check-in because it just means you can use them in more places to do more things. It doesn't mean we necessarily have less staff. It just means they can be more flexible. And part of their job might be bringing a glass of champagne to welcome a customer, or part of their job might be actually meeting you at your car. You can do all those things now because it's fully mobile. It's disconnected from a check-in desk. It just allows you that level of flexibility because you can also just have a check-in desk, right? I mean, you can do anything you want. That's kind of what we're trying to strive to empower with our hoteliers. Casey, next slide, please. And the same is true on the other side of this, right? By building from the guest backwards, we also built a user experience that is consistent. And so what the staff member sees is actually pretty similar to what the guest sees, and it allows them to communicate at a level that is often significantly more difficult in legacy systems. It reduces front house calls significantly because the guest is more in control of their own process. So there's less dependency, there's less need to lean on them. It also allows for increasing productivity among housekeeping staff, better assigning staff to different functions, allowing for quicker turnover because there's also mobile checkout. I know I am horrible about this, especially when I traveled for consulting. The frequency with which I checked out was almost zero. I was sort of always in a hurry, right? And so going through the checkout process was just waited till that bill got sent. Nowadays, it's very easy to check out. I click a button literally on the exit email on my phone. This allows, in a lot of cases, staff to get to work much faster because they know the room is empty. I've confirmed it. Those things are really critical to increasing throughput and improving functionality. That sometimes it's just, it's not even that I didn't, it's not that I was choosing not to do it. I just sort of was in a hurry and didn't think about it. Just re-upping the process allows us to operate hotels much smoother and maximize the usability of our resources, which is what we're talking about today is a really critical function. Casey, last slide, please. The last thing I wanted to talk about is sort of, why we think the partnerships with Revinate and Duetto are so important. There's nothing we like hearing more than that it's working very well for our actual hoteliers, right? That our focus on connectivity and seamless integration is working. But the other big piece of this is, I think a lot of this group comes from marketing backgrounds. I certainly do. And one of the things that we think has often been sort of overlooked in the hospitality space is if you talk about, to get very remedial here for a second, for which I apologize, the sort of 4 Ps of marketing, we spend a lot of time on pricing and promotion, right? We spend some time on placement, depending on how you view that. The thing that we don't spend a ton of time talking about is product. And one of the things that we really want to work with our partners on getting better about is defining the product, right? Historically, we've been so locked into that your product is one guest room for one 18-hour, 20-hour, depending on your check-in and check-out times, period, right? One of the things that Stayntouch is really committed to is making sure that even your product can be redefined as it's needed. Can't tell you how many hoteliers throughout this process went to very different hospitality sort of mechanisms than they were using previously. whether that was that they were housing displaced workers, which meant all of a sudden they went from being a short-term hotel to a very long-term hotel, whether that meant that they were selling, conference rooms for co-meeting space in places where office buildings were closed. People had to get very creative with how they leveraged assets. And this is a great opportunity to sort of stress, this sort of, in some ways, very laughable moniker we like to use, that we want to be a property monetization system, not just a property management system, right? If we can help you define a better product, we can help bring to life really great functionality that exists within the Revinates and Duettos of the world to really build algorithmic monetization processes for this newly defined product. And so this is a space that we're just scratching the surface on, right? We've got hourly functionality. It is inbuilt in the system. It was sort of the core of the way that Stayntouch was built. Today, not even 15% of our hotels fully take advantage of that functionality. We see that really starting to change as time moves forward and we get better about leveraging the core product itself, which is our physical asset broken into as many pieces over as many different periods of time as possible. And we're really excited about what that future represents and why partners that are doing super innovative things in pricing strategies and in marketing communication become even more important, because there is more to take advantage of now and more to take advantage of that customers maybe aren't as comfortable or used to learning about. And so how we communicate that and how we price and how we evolve those strategies becomes even more key. So really excited about what this means for where our industry is going and the opportunity to work with really innovative hoteliers like those on the call with us today, who are the people that are putting in motion how we take advantage of that and how we do continue to evolve this marketplace to be more responsive to market demand.
That's great. Thank you so much, Michael. So I think some of the most interesting, digital transformation that's happened has been what's gone down with on-property experiences. So it's really cool to see how that comes together, especially with the integrations with things like CRM that deliver guest intelligence and things like that. So just a question for you, Michael. From your opinion, what has been the most impactful operations area automated to help free up staff, which is leaner, as we know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure that there's any individual operations area, and perhaps this is my own ignorance. But when I look at this, I think of the way that we deliver hospitality more as sort of like an evolving ecosystem than I do is the old school way of looking at individual operations staff. So certainly there are experts in different areas, right? I think that is inevitable. I think where we're trying to grow to is a world where we've got a GM and a bunch of mini GMs who all sort of drop into the areas that need focus in any given time, right? And so we're talking about building a depth that is maybe not quite as deep as it used to be, because a lot of that depth used to be just learning the tools. As the tools become more intuitive, we can functionally deliver better without the same amount of time or depth of dedication. And that allows us to extend our breadth. So I can think more about how my changes impact everybody else's operating areas. And I think that's really what we've tried to focus on, is creating greater connectivity across the ecosystem of delivering hospitality, so that if I make a price change, I know what impact that's going to potentially have to housekeeping staff or front desk staff that I need. And if I can evolve and report earlier on what my early check-in versus late checkout strategy looks like, now I can also plan more appropriately for that area. And so the more that we create this sort of smooth flow of information and transparency across, I think the more we do sort of a little bit more with a little bit less in every area, as opposed to I'm going to automate this one process and just sort of hope it runs smoothly. Now it's like I can get functionally better everywhere and gain efficiencies everywhere just by creating greater connectivity across that ecosystem. And that's really where I think we've seen the best hoteliers be the most successful, is creative application of resources rather than trying to automate away a task that they particularly don't like. That will happen naturally if we can just get better at sort of functional operations across the board.
I like it. It's a good flip way to look at things. So thank you so much, Michael, for that. So next we're going to turn it over to JD Kane with Revinate. JD, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for hosting, Casey, and thanks Gary and Michael for those good insights that we're seeing across your customers. And Lucas and Brandon, thanks for joining as well to lend some customer credence to this webinar this morning. So yeah, I'm going to talk about marketing and CRM efficiencies as we've seen throughout this pandemic, and just wanted to start by showing that this is global news. These are global newspapers, CNN's covering this. Everybody knows out there, and like Lucas and Brandon both talked about at the beginning of this, we're seeing hiring difficulties, staffing shortages while demand is rising at the same time. So this is something that's been on everybody's mind. My entire sales team was talking about this with every customer this summer. So we went and did a research study and talked to hundreds of hoteliers across 5 different global regions. And there were some key takeaways that I want to cover on these next few slides. And number one is that 95% of people are experiencing hiring challenges. So that I don't know who the 5% are that are hiring no problem. I think this has got to be 100%, but somebody out there said they're doing fine. But look, everybody's trying to get people back into the hotel, and it's very difficult to hire those people. And then on the next slide, some of them admit that they've been short-staffed for more than 6 months. So 60% of people out there are saying that this is a long-term problem, and we know this isn't going away anytime soon. So just 2 quotes that I want to bring up here that'll summarize the sentiment of what customers are saying out there. And the shortages put extra pressure on our reservations, front office, maintenance, housekeeping, and conference service teams. We are operating at historically high occupancies and ADRs, but with only 70 to 75% of our normal staffing levels. I mean, that could have been your quote from earlier, Lucas. I mean, you're doing great. People are showing up again, but you're trying to cover it with less people because you literally can't get the people in the door to be able to operate like you used to. And then one more quote before I go into what some of our customers have been doing to alleviate this. We've adjusted operations to be more self-service. Marketing makes a lot of online specials to minimize phone calls. So people using the technology to reroute people to places where you do get leverage being on the technology side. So yeah, I want to talk about a few things that we've seen our customers doing out there, because the whole strategy is automation can help you get through this. So first off, we've seen our customers during these times when people aren't traveling as much to survey their own guests and do it in pre-arrival emails as well to capture preferences out there. So this alleviates your staff from needing to input anything at the front desk or staff around the hotel trying to talk to guests and capture clever information about the guests. Go ahead and poll them and capture those preferences, put them into the CRM, and then you can leverage those later to give relevant offers and relevant communications to guests based on what they gave you as data. And then next, this one speaks to what Brandon was saying, where things are changing all the time. Talk to many customers where they have hotels across different regions, different states, different counties, where you have regulations that are different in every single one of those. So let's get pre-arrival communications out there to speak to exactly what's going on, exactly what the cleaning policies are, what F&B is open, what might be some of the travel restrictions on getting to the hotel. And then so the guest is fully informed. They're also going to have a better experience when they show up. They're going to know what to expect. But then on top of all that, you can use some of that preference information that you captured to do targeted upsells and drive revenue for the folks that are showing up. A lot of the data shows that the people that are showing up are ready to spend. And this is a great way of capturing more revenue per stay. This was an example Aperium did, where they did a pre-arrival 7 days in advance and were able to drive 2.7K just by running this campaign alone. And then lastly here, another example of using data captured through the guests. So in essence, outsourcing that data capture, in this case, using surveys to understand who's a promoter of the property, and then in turn using that data to get these folks that are promoters to share it out about the hotel, share it with friends, give them a code where they can book and their friends can book as well. Everybody can use the rate code, and that way they reducing the burden on capturing that data, and in turn on marketing. Outsource your marketing, why not? And they were able to capture 101 different room nights by doing this clever campaign. So this automation also applies to the voice channel side too, and wanted to talk about a little bit of research that we've conducted recently to say that on the voice channel, it converts at 3x higher than digital. So why is that, you might ask? Well, that's because you have someone on the phone that's talking these people through exactly what's going on at the hotel. And this makes people very comfortable with making a booking decision. Those reservation agents can also be trained to do upsells at the time. So in our numbers, we've seen that the price per stay or the revenue per stay is 3x higher than on the digital channel. Now, in automating the lead capture and connecting your reservation side with your CRM and PMS, now you can do things to make your reservations agents much more efficient while they're on the phone. So you can digitally capture data as you're talking to that guest, because many guests don't book the first time they call. They call back, and now when they call back, you can pop that information to your reservation agent, so you're much more efficient on the phone. You know exactly the dates they were talking about, exactly the room they were talking about. You can have a much more deep and rich conversation right from the get-go, rather than asking this guest to give you all their data again. So you can get tremendous efficiency that way. You also get efficiency on the callback. If they've made the reservation, they're calling back in to perhaps change something about the reservation. You've saved tremendous amounts of time. Once again, popping up that information, you know their stay, you know their dates, you know their spend, and you can service them in a much more efficient fashion. So what we've seen in doing that is 35% efficiency, taking a 6.5 minute call down to a 4.5 minute call, and just giving some example numbers out there. If you get 50,000 hours worth of calls, or 50,000 calls per year, spending roughly 6.5 minutes on the phone, that's 5,417 hours that you're spending on the phone. At $20 per hour, that's over $100,000 that you're spending in labor costs, and being more efficient to the tune of 35% is over $35,000 worth of savings right there. So yeah, automating that voice channel, connecting it to your PMS and CRM is a great way to get efficiency and drive revenue and save costs as well.
Thanks, JD. That was great. It's awesome to hear the voice channel getting into the conversation. It's been definitely a big increase during the pandemic. So question for you, JD. What are some new CRM automation features that are making a big impact for hoteliers?
Yeah, I think we can bucket all of these into ease of use. You're there. You've got, as we've been talking about this whole time, you're short-staffed. You're having a hard time getting staff in. So for the staff that's there, let's make things easier to use. And you could break that down across really 3 different areas and saying collecting data, like we talked about, getting preferences, getting surveys, capturing it from the phones, capturing it from your website, PMS. So make that easy to collect that data, then apply some artificial intelligence on it. One of the great things about this, one of the silver linings you could say of the pandemic, is that it really forced us vendors to get more clever and leverage AI more, so that could help alleviate some of the staffing needs. And some of the things that you've seen there are around merge and dedupe of profile records. So the snippets of data records that come into the PMS and other channels can be combined in a very clever and advanced way. Other things you see on things like messaging platforms, having AI handle 50% of the conversations. I've seen messaging vendors out there that can help deal with all the requests that are coming in from guests, all in an automated way. Lastly, I'll say that segmentation is super important now. geography-based segmentation, certainly when there have been massive travel restrictions, and then as restrictions open up in certain areas, you want to target people via geography. The other thing that I've seen that's really cool is day of week type of segmentation to say, for those guests checking out Friday, let's do something to get them to stay the weekend. Conversely, guests that are checking out on Sunday, let's do something to have them leisurely work from the hotel as the family extends the vacation, and mom and dad can work from these fantastic destinations we travel to.
It's great, JD. Yeah, I'm really fascinated by what's going on with AI and machine learning. I mean, we're collecting all this data. It's great to see us actually starting to put it to use in a more advanced way to serve the guests. So thank you for that. So now we're going to turn it back over to our friends Lucas with Bridgeton Hospitality and Brandon with Pacifica Hotels. So at the start of the webinar, we talked about some of the challenges, but we didn't really go too far into how you guys got on the other side and what things are like now after you kind of come through some of those things that you discussed. So Lucas, let's start with you. You were talking about all your systems being siloed, and that you had kind of come to the point where you're like, okay, enough of this. We've got to integrate this stuff. Tell me what that decision was like and how it's going so far.
Yeah. So one of the things that we had learned kind of going into the pandemic was that our lack of integration and our current technology was limiting our ability to give the level of service that we wanted to give to our guests. For instance, we were kind of stuck behind desks at a lot of these properties that are very, very in person and very experiential. And we were kind of chained to the desk to do check-ins. Well, by upgrading that technology, we were able to, as Michael was talking about, we could take the check-in process to the guest. It kind of released us from being stuck behind that wall that the desk can sometimes become. So we were able to make a much cleaner check-in process and a much more personalized check-in process. And so we had a point where we were able to go to them, do a check-in process that's very personalized, very in person, right there next to you. And we actually saw our service levels increase during this with fewer staff, which I know is not something that goes together a lot. So the technology allowed us to give the level of service that we really wanted to.
That's great, Lucas. I mean, that's what hospitality is supposed to be about, right? And the more that we can
Absolutely.
come to our guests and to where they are is amazing. So that's great to hear. So Brandon, tell me about what happened with you guys and your properties. I know you touched on it a little bit, but could you kind of go a little bit more about how you guys kind of got through this experience and how things are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So as mentioned, all of our independent hotels, we kind of finally got the cart across the finish line with getting the entire portfolio of independent hotels live on Stayntouch during the pandemic, which was, again, just a great success to have a unified tech stack, especially from a company like us where revenue management is centralized. So to have our team only have to master one PMS system instead of several, to manage the portfolio of hotels and have a consistent set of reports that we can then incorporate into our daily and weekly strategies has been key. And as I mentioned, staffing was such a challenge, as everybody's said and everybody's dealt with firsthand. And so I think just being able to collaborate and having a mobile team with Stayntouch, being able to have housekeepers on the floor and front desk and out in the lobby and not everybody chained to the front desk, the command center. Everybody had to be more flexible and had to wear multiple hats. And so your front desk person might also have to be, setting up breakfast or helping guests with luggage. And that means that they can't stay behind the front desk at all times. So it was definitely a huge success of having a mobile centric platform. And then the integration with Duetto just allowed us to more seamlessly be able to keep our strategy in play at all times to make sure that we're maximizing whatever room availability we did have. I think that was the biggest piece, was constantly shifting of how many rooms can we actually get cleaned today, and so how many can we sell. And having that integration between Stayntouch and Duetto allowed the revenue system to always be aware of what's the true inventory available, and then price it accordingly so that we can maximize out on what we do have available to sell. So definitely nice to have that.
Yeah, no, that's great. So it seems like kind of a trend that I've been noticing over the last year or two is that, we're talking about technology here, technology for revenue management, PMS and operations on site and marketing. The kind of conversion of those teams, like technology is supposed to be enabler of process changes anyway, right? But I was wondering if you guys had that experience where you're now collaborating with these other departments to make decisions. Are you possibly looking at their systems and their reports from these things that are now integrated together?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot more collaboration. I think, historically revenue and marketing have always been, fairly close-knit departments, just considering we have more or less the same objective in mind. But I think the biggest, probably the biggest change and whatnot during the pandemic was just the closeness that was required with operations. Like I said, just being in constant communication of what's going on, how many rooms can we have, what's the housekeeping staffing situation. I think this was the first time that revenue managers actually cared how many housekeepers were coming in today and how many were scheduled. And so that was a big shift. But again, having a mobile-centric and a system that was as seamless as Stayntouch and the integrations with the other systems really allowed us to stay on top of it. And I couldn't imagine what it would have been like, 2 years ago when we had a little bit more of a siloed systems and less communication between the two.
That's great. Okay, so I think we're going to turn it over to the audience and see if we've got any questions from our attendees. So let's just take a look here in our question area. So let's see. Yeah, so I have a question here. I think, Gary, this would probably be a good one for you, is that, and I know you touched on this, but it seems like we've still got, some folks that are a bit concerned, like that they say, I'm interested in automating my, pricing for revenue management, but I'm scared of losing control and making sure that all my rates, stay where they need to be according to demand. So anything else that you'd want to add on that?
Yeah, I would say there's opportunities to dig deeper. We didn't necessarily go into some of the other elements that revolve around pricing in Duetto, for example, just in the sense of you want to float off of a certain competitor and you want to do that conditionally on certain days of the week, only when you're at a certain level of occupancy, for example. Those are ways that you can sort of take back control in terms of the endpoint when it comes to the recommendations. But at the end of the day, it's just whether you're a Duetto customer or not, it's about looking at your rate acceptance with your RMS and having the sort of the peace of mind to understand where you stand today and measuring that versus if you do turn on automation. So that's what we've done with a lot of clients to ultimately just show them the results in terms of their behavior in the system when it comes to rate acceptance. And then ultimately, hopefully, down the line, we can show them some great returns when it comes to RevPAR.
Great, thanks so much, Gary. JD, I think this is a good one for you. This person says, I'm the last woman standing in the marketing department. I'm overwhelmed with all the tasks that I have. If you had any advice to me about where I should start, what technologies I should use to get things done with this increased demand, what would you recommend?
Last person standing. This is dire. All right, we got to help her out. Let's I think that one of the things that we've been harping on all day is automation, right? And so in talking to customers and talking to the agencies I work with, the things that have helped them get through this have been automating what you can. And I'd say based on research that Revinate did on everything that was sent in 2020 during the pandemic, the things that convert the highest there in automated emails, and they convert higher than one-time sends, by the way, because they're usually, well, they're always based off of a guest event, whether the guest booked, they checked in, or they checked out. These automated messages go out, and the ones I'm going to talk about are based on when the guest checked out. The OTA win-back campaign is a big one. So you segment based on people that stayed with you via OTA, and you happen to capture their email, whether it was put together via the profile synthesis or your front desk captured it, put it right in the PMS, it was attached to the record, you captured it via Wi-Fi, whatever. Send them a campaign, and that converts the highest of any automated campaign we've seen out there. So you can get great revenue. Everybody's trying to do that, convert those OTA guests to direct guests. The other ones, the We Miss You, just based on when they checked out. People travel in cycles, so you can get them when they're looking to be booking again and come back to your hotel. Lastly, the good old birthday campaigns. Everybody loves a campaign on their birthday. So those convert the third highest of any of the automated emails. So you got to get that birthday data. Everybody wants to do it. And then we show them a readout that, hey, this isn't actually in the PMS. So Michael makes it easy to capture birthday at check-in. Yeah, Stayntouch can do that. And then you can run your birthday campaigns that convert very high as well. So I'd say get those automated campaigns, OTA win back, We Miss You, and birthday. And you're doing a good start.
Yeah, those birthday things work. They really, really do. It's so great. So this one I think is good for you, Michael. So they say, how can I convince my ownership we need more automated on-property software? He sees the benefits of contactless technology, but won't give up the budget.
Yeah, interesting. Good question. Well, I think one, in a lot of cases, sort of cloud-based technology, might actually help your budget. I certainly will be honest, that Stayntouch is not, we're not priced at the bottom of the market, certainly. So, if you're just looking for cost savings, we're probably not your best option. We do think that, significantly reducing total cost of ownership is one of the key reasons to move to mobile. We've already talked obviously about staff benefits here, but I think even if you look at managing a technology stack, having something that integrates seamlessly and reduces the inputs you have to have from a resource perspective, whether that's time, energy, right, and money, I think is one of the really critical reasons to make this move. Your stack is going to go cloud, right? Like there's sort of no world in which you're going to stay on-prem indefinitely. Like the costs of ownership are just too high long term. So I think that how you make that move is really key. We had a really good discussion yesterday with someone about this. I'll use a terrible quote, but I love it. I heard it from a realtor, actually, hilariously. This realtor said, a lot of people buy a house because they like the pitches of the windows or the color of the house, right? He was like, I really recommend that people sort of design the life that you want. Think about what matters to you, what's important to you, and then find a house that fits that, because you can paint it. But if you really want to be walkable to activities, it's a lot harder to pick a house up and move it than it is to change it from white to blue, right? And so I think we recommend the same. I don't tell people when we talk to them or they reach out looking for advice that go cloud tomorrow. What I tell people is think about where you want to go, right? Operationally, what does your team need from a user experience perspective? What are you trying to create? Lucas, I think what you said before was awesome, right? If you guys have a hotel portfolio that really is all about experience, these are great properties that are really driving towards experience. Define what you want that experience to look like, and then find a technology stack that's going to enable you to maximize that experience, right? Both the experience for, as we sort of talk about in 3 pillars, the experience for the staff, the experience for the guest, and the experience for the ownership group, who, let's be honest, is trying to create a return on this investment that they've made. So I think what I would recommend is think about this sort of more long-term and related to your strategy for your property management, right? Not your property management system, your property management. And then look at how you're going to build a system that supports that. I think sometimes it's too easy to say, go cloud because it's cheaper and it's connected. Like, no, go cloud because it makes sense for what you're trying to do, and you've identified the partners you want to work with, and you believe in the operating structure you're trying to build. And then feel really good sleeping at night, because when that inevitably changes in 9 months, it's going to be a lot easier to change it if you've got a cloud-built system that can connect into other partners and change the way you manage your property. So, I think those are really the key considerations. But this should be a major decision, and we think it's important that you treat it that way. We'll be able to better serve you if you know what you're looking for, and you'll be much happier if you've defined ahead of time and then allow us to grow with you as opposed to sort of picking and moving as you go. So that would certainly be my recommendation.
No, that's great. Yeah, and I'm sure the ownership, if they can sort of see the vision beyond just a more kind of like tactical, we want to go contactless, they're more likely to accept and embrace that. Well, I think we're just about out of time. Thank you, Brandon and Lucas, so much for joining us today. It was really great to hear from you. It's awesome to hear how you guys have come out on the other side stronger, it sounds like, than ever, and learned a lot from this experience. And thanks to all of our panelists as well. So we just hope that you guys have a great day and stay in touch. Thanks a bunch. Bye.
Thanks all. Thank you so much, Casey.
Yes, thanks.